Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's sessions. As Elke mentioned, my name is Tanya McBride, and I am a senior retirement plan consultant with Definity. Today, I want to outline a method of allocating employer contributions that may enable you, as the plan sponsor, to maximize your contributions into a defined contribution plan. So, to start at the beginning, qualified plans are those that are subject to both the Department of Labor and the IRS regulations and have various non-discrimination tests that they must pass in order to remain qualified. There are two main types of these qualified plans, and the first one is a defined contribution plan. Most of you are probably very familiar with this because in this type of plan are the 401k and the profit sharing plans. So the other type of qualified plan is a defined benefit plan, and these are your pension plans. So the method of calculating contributions for each of these types of plan is very distinct. A defined contribution plan, the contribution starts with a dollar amount that the plan sponsor wants to contribute, and then it is allocated to the participants based on the formula in the legal plan documents. A defined benefit plan, on the other hand, starts with a specific benefit that will be paid out to a participant on their retirement date, and then calculates what that contribution has to be right now in order to reach that goal, that benefit goal, when they're ready to retire. And so because of market fluctuation and other factors, these defined benefit contributions are much, much larger than a defined contribution. So the IRS allows defined contribution plans to use the defined benefit method of allocating contributions to 401k and profit sharing plans to a certain degree. And in order to use this method of contribution, the plan must pass a non-discrimination test that we call cross-testing. This is the most flexible allocation formula for a defined contribution plan. So how does cross-testing work? First, your legal documents that govern your plan must allow for this type of allocation method. So contact your retirement plan consultant to determine if your plan has this feature already or if it needs to be amended to include it. So if your document does allow for this allocation method, the next step is to group participants into classes. A few examples of this class grouping could be, say, highly compensated employees and non-highly compensated employees. If you're a doctor group, it could be physicians in one group and staff in the other. If you are a legal group, you could have attorneys in one class, paralegals in the next, and then the rest of the staff in the third one. Most formulas are written, when I say formulas, most are written in the legal plan document so that each participant can be in his or her own class, which is the most flexible way of grouping your participants. Now, age, race, religion, gender are not allowable classifications and are immediately discriminatory. And this can get kind of tricky. One of the things, as an example, all participants, let's say you classify all participants who work less than 500 hours in one group, and it just so happens that all of these participants are close to or at retirement age. That's discriminatory. On the surface, it is discriminatory. So be careful when you group your participants into these classes. They have to be very clearly non-discriminatory. So once we have these participants classified into groups, we usually have a discussion at that point with the plan sponsor to get an estimate on how much that they would like to contribute to each classification. An example would be, say, on Class A, contribution that is 10% of compensation. And then Class B would get 5% of compensation. And so once we have these contribution percentage targets, we start the cross-testing, we being your consultants, and to determine if those percentages are discriminatory. If these tests fail, the percentages have to be adjusted until the test does pass. And there's several ways of these adjustments. Obvious would be the higher percentage group would get less, the lower percentage group would get more, that type of thing. So what factors will come into play when this type of allocation method is used? The number one factor in this type of cross-testing is age. Earlier, the beginning of our discussion, I mentioned that a defined benefit plan starts with a specific benefit that will be paid out to a participant on their retirement date. And then it calculates what contribution amount is needed right now to reach that benefit goal. So your defined benefit plan is calculating years to retirement. The closer a person is to retirement age, the larger the amount allocated to them will be, so that they have less time for those funds to grow. So their contribution amount will be larger. This is the concept behind cross-testing in a defined contribution plan. Now, a few other factors that come into play: participants' compensation, size of your workforce may influence it, the amount of contribution that the employer wants to make, among other things. These are the main ones. So a quick illustration. Next slide, please. There we go. Employee number 1, age 25, and retirement date in all of these allocation tests is age 65. So this particular employee, number 1, age 25, has 40 years to retirement. But notice employee number 2 only has 10 years because of his age. So here's an example. Next slide, please. Here's an example of what a contribution allocation formula could be based on these age groups. So notice that the total contribution is only $62,250, but the highly compensated employee number 1 at age 55 has got the bulk of the contribution. The second employee down, highly compensated person number 1, $50,000, age 30, their contribution is $2,500. And notice that the third person, age 25, received even less, $1,750. And this is because of age. All of this is because of age. So obviously this is just an illustration. Depending on the population, your population, these numbers will work out differently. And also this example does not include salary deferrals or matching. So the numbers are going to change. This is just a basic profit sharing illustration. One thing I would like to point out about this example is notice that the 2 non-highly compensated employees are allocated 5% of their annual compensation. Depending on how much the highly compensated group receives, the regulations require that the non-Hileys receive up to a 5% contribution. So that's usually the max in this type of allocation method that the non-Hileys will receive. So those are the basics for allocating a contribution using cross-testing. There are a lot of factors that feed into this type of allocation and testing method. So it is really rather complicated. So please contact your retirement plan consultant to see if this type of allocation method would work for you and your workforce. So I appreciate your time today. My time is about up. And are there any questions, or if not, I'll turn it back over to Elke.
We do have some questions, Tanya. As I said, I was looking forward to having you present this material so that I could ask some questions. And we do just have a couple of them that we want to address. So I'm wondering if you could just go back to the basic and talk to us about what do you mean when you say a contribution is allocated as if it were a defined benefit contribution?
Okay. The defined benefit plans are an actuarial, those contributions made each year, if I get too technical, I'm sorry. It's an actuarial equation to make sure that employee number one gets, say, $50,000 a year when they're ready to retire. In a defined contribution plan, that contribution is not calculated that way. It's just saying, here's what plan sponsor A wants to put in the plan, and whatever the market does from here to retirement date, that's what this person will end up getting when they retire, which is pretty nebulous, because who knows what the market's going to do. However, that's why it's called cross-testing. The IRS allows us to add this extra dimension to calculating a DC plan, defined contribution plan, contribution based on these defined benefit methods. So that's why it means cross-testing. We're crossing over the two types of plans to try and increase the benefit for people who are closer to retirement age. That makes sense?
Hopefully. Yeah, it does. Yeah, and I appreciate, I know you said that in the presentation. I think it bears repeating. It's something that if this is a method that they need to think about, then let's just make sure it's really clear, and repeating it again is a good way to tackle that. What are the valid classifications for a class? And does this mean I have to treat all employees fitting the same circumstances the same way?
My answer is not necessarily. I'm not going to be able to get too detailed because it depends highly on that population, that employer's population. But you could, as long as inside each class is not discriminatory, you can divide it up however you want. I've seen management as a classification, rank and file as a classification, owners as a classification. So, it's pretty flexible as long as you don't target somebody for those, race, age, and those types of things. It's really pretty flexible. It's a great way of maximizing your contribution.
So would Definity be able to run an example for a particular demographic then? Is that something that we could do?
Absolutely. And which is what the retirement plan consultants do. Definitely contact them now. When I say them, I mean us, and we will run projections depending on the scenario. If the employer only wants to put in $40,000 for this year, then we can run scenarios to show the employer if we classify people in this way, here's how much each person would get. And we just keep running those numbers, running these projections until it satisfies the plan sponsor's intent. So yes, sooner rather than later would be great.
That's right. That's right. And like we have on the screen, I think the base that we want to say is that it can get very, we can really tailor it according to your needs. So be sure, if you're a plan sponsor and you want to know more about this, reach out to your retirement plan consultant. And if Tanya's yours, reach out to her, or others that may be helping you with your plan. They'll be more than willing to talk to you a little bit more about this topic.